Hey, welcome everybody to another Thursday with Third Path webinar. As you know, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's our 12th annual Father's Day webinar. And since Third Path was founded 23 years ago, I knew if we really wanted to create that future society where we could care well for our families and have men live the lives they want and create gender equity, a critical ingredient was engaging and supporting dads to be involved in the care of their families. And it's been a wonderful journey to help think with dads about the next step they can take around the kind of work-life story they want to create for themselves and how they want to role model for their families to be this actively engaged dad. Today, we've got some amazing participants who will be helping us get started with a conversation about how the pandemic has helped dads think in new ways around their work and family goals. And then today is a town hall, so you get to actually participate in the discussion that we have after we hear from our panelists. I'm going to start with a few slides to get us started, just to help us think about some of the big issues. And I'm also going to start by welcoming our guests. We have Julian Lute coming today. He'll be one of the three panelists. He's the Senior Strategic Advisor for the Great Place to Work. We have Kelly Little, a coach, speaker, strategist, and you'll see he has been spending his life dedicated to uplifting young men around these issues, and is himself, both Julian and Kelly, great father as well. And I'm also pleased to have Ed Frauenheim joining us again today. He was with us last month when we were talking about the importance of how shorter work weeks can help fathers be more engaged in families. And today he's going to be joining Julian and Kelly for our discussion about how the pandemic has helped us think in new ways as fathers around our involvement and care of our children or care of our aging parents. In fact, I would argue there's kind of three pillars for change that we've been learning about for making change for everybody, but especially for dads. One is the idea that we need to think differently about work and how we can approach our work. And clearly remote work has been a game changer, but I think what you're going to hear today is it's not the whole story. Because really, in order to have time for family, you actually need to change how much we work so we have time and energy to care well for our families. It's also something that's going to help us, think about gender equity by really supporting dads to be actively engaged in their families. And the thing we're going to get to eventually is also to talk about how this is all connected to leadership. When we think about definitions of what it means to be a man or what it means to be a leader, there's some interesting interplay between those two concepts that we'll be surfacing today and thinking about how we can make some change around this. But I don't want to minimize how much remote work has been revolutionary for so many people. And certainly when we think back about some of the pioneers in the Third Path community, they've been using remote work way before the pandemic to figure out how to create an integrated solution. You can hear these stories on our recordings of our webinars. December, we had a great webinar about promoting well-being in families, and February too, around how remote work plays an important role of that. We also really, all year long, have explored this issue from different lenses. We had Scott Beeson on our very first webinar of the year. He wrote this great book, The Whole Person Workplace, and how we can really create an organizational approach that supports people to live whole lives. But I've used this quote where Scott's talking about how paternity leave really made a difference for him. And in February, we had Amy Beacom join us because when dads figure out how to get involved right from the start around the care of their children, right from parental leave, it really makes a big difference in the long-term outcomes for themselves and their families. And we also had a wonderful webinar just last month about how if we're working less, 32-hour work weeks or 4-day work weeks, it can actually help us also improve our lives and improve father involvement. And I thought it was really interesting when we talked with Alex last month, that many of the people who invented this concept of a 4-day work week for their organizations were actually exhausted leaders. And I think, again, that will come up when we think about how we want to change things for dads and how it's connected to our assumptions around what makes a real leader. All right, so I'm going to get Julian, Kelly, and Ed talking about these 3 pillars of change. Then you'll see a little bit later, there's an opportunity for you, the participants in today's town hall discussion, to share your thoughts on these topics as well. So we're going to be talking about how is remote work a game changer? We're going to be talking about how remote work is a game changer, but maybe not the whole answer. We're going to talk about how families need time and energy to provide care. And we're going to talk about how traditional assumptions around masculinity and leadership impacts men's ability to be actively engaged at home. Wonderful. Hey, welcome, Julian, Kelly, Ed. I'm so happy that you're here with us. You guys represent so many wonderful things. You know, somebody who's really been thinking differently about how to be a father and how to do fatherhood and work in a way that you have time and energy for both. Sometimes succeeding, and if you're like me, sometimes failing, but we'll be talking about that too. So we want to start with that question. How has remote work been a game changer for the people you work with, and maybe for you personally too? Julian, how has remote work been a game changer for you and the people you work with? Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the whole Third Path team and the panelists for making this possible. So how has it been a game changer? I mean, really for me, it's allowed me to participate in my family much more meaningfully in a way that I wasn't able to do before. So for example, taking kids to soccer practice, you know, the sports activities, being able to make them breakfast in the morning, you know, help them send them off on their day. I would also say that because I can work at whenever I need to, when they get out of school, you know, or when they get back from daycare, that energy and that excitement, I'm able to participate. Whereas before that, I would have to say, hey, y'all, I need y'all to, you know, give me another hour and a half. And by that time, you know, you only have 2 hours in the afternoon, or at least we do in the evening, to really be a dad. And if I'm spending an hour of it, you know, continuing work, and the last hour is kind of eating and bath and bed, I don't really get that time to interact. So being able to work remotely has allowed me to pick my spots and really find out where the most important things, knowing where my kids' energy is, and be there for those. You know, when it's time to go to bed, sometimes I'll let mom handle that, because, you know, I could go put in another 45 minutes to do something. But she's been supporting in that. My wife's been supporting in that part of the journey too. So that's where remote work has been very, very influential in my life lately.
Yeah, and Julian, maybe I'm making this story up, but I see your smile. And I think that this is great for kids to have you around, but it sounds like it's also been fun for you to be around this way. Like, that's actually been like, is that something you want to keep happening as you look ahead, that you have that time, that the way that you're enjoyed it this year?
I do. It's necessary for me. You know, I think about my kids during the day, and I care about how they interact at school and in all the things that they're participating in. And I know that there's some guidance that I can provide. There's me being energetic and actually spending 15 minutes. You know, like I learned that my youngest kid, we put him in soccer, and he didn't really know the rules for soccer. So the first day that he goes out there, he's running around like a wild person. He's kicking his teammates' balls, like he's doing all the things. And I was really embarrassed, honestly. But then after I took like 15 seconds to sort of chill out, I was like, oh, he doesn't know the rules. He doesn't understand. We put him in the game, but he doesn't know the game. And so that next week, because I'm able to work flexibly, as soon as he came home, we could play for 15 minutes. I could kick him the ball. I could say, now I'm on your team. What do you do? I'm not on your team. What do you do? And we could do that. So when he showed up again for the next soccer game, he was, you know, I give him a B plus on that one. If the first game was a little bit lower, but I needed that time in that space. So yes, I need that for just for my interaction, because I get anxious when I don't know what's happening. And then you just get reports from school that your kids aren't doing what they're supposed to do. it's like I can't outsource everything. Let me be a dad and do that. So that I do. I get a lot of enjoyment from seeing them grow, and it also reduces my anxiety because I'm able to participate and actually see what's going on versus third-hand information and just emotion, because they didn't do the right thing at times.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. And Kelly, we're going to hear from you next. And what's fun is Kelly's kids are not kids anymore, actually. So he's kind of seeing the stages of how children change over time. And I'm thinking, Kelly, you probably are remembering something I'm thinking about with teenagers. The beauty of remote work is you can't really say, hey, teenager, let's have that deep conversation right now. Instead, it's kind of us being around and available, that teenager actually starts talking to us. And so just kind of being present in the background when that teenager comes home from school turns out to be one of the beauties of remote work. It allows for that unexpected conversation with the teenager too. But anyways, you've seen your kids grow up. How did remote work help you be the dad you wanted to be? Was it different over the last year or so for you?
It was different over the last year for me, only because already a lot of my work was national, international, and local. So I had that approach of remote work, but my children didn't have to adjust, pivot, or shift as it relates to the pandemic. And so having everybody in the house, having conversations around how we're going to prioritize things, it really kind of manifested some things that we had already been preparing our children for in that adjustment, and even watching my wife have to adjust, because she fortunately kicked me out of my office in the house, which meant I had to go into the office that I was paying for anyway. But just being able to see, to Julian's point, some things that I didn't get to see sometimes, because although I was remote, I was then in the house a little bit more than I was before. And so being able to have those conversations. And the funny thing is, Jessica, we do get to have those conversations because based on my background and when I was in the military, my children were young. And so since then, I made sure that not only was I present, but I had presence, and the engagement component was extremely critical for me to make sure I righted those things when I had to be gone. And so really taking the opportunity to observe, not necessarily talk a lot, but listen more, and then actually even reprioritizing, because prior to that, I might be out of town sometime as well. Now me and my wife get to make a decision around who's going to do what, and really give her a chance to be able to take relief in some things around the house as it relates to shifting and helping a little more with the dishes, or maybe taking loads of clothing and folding the clothes and taking a more active role from that traditional concept of being provider and protector to being more of a nurturer and more supportive in other instances. And so for my children to be able to see that, or my little adults to be able to see that, I think was something that was really critical, because it's one thing to say things, but when they actually see certain things in action and see you having those conversations, it really helps prepare them for the next phase of their journey.
Yeah, oh my goodness, absolutely. Think about the role modeling you and I have been doing for our young adult children. My son has watched, somebody just like you, sharing in that household responsibilities. And, as when they were very little, they used to call us mom, dad, because we were so interchangeable. And so you've really kind of created this team approach that means that you can step away and know that each other can manage it and help each other out. And your kids are watching that. And it means that they're going to be looking for something very different one day if they choose a partner too. So thank you for all of that, Kelly. And a great point that remote work allows us even to do things like get the laundry in, get dinner prepared, and all that stuff makes our lives a lot easier. Wonderful. So Ed, you've been listening in. I don't know. Oh, Kelly, go ahead. Yeah.
I had one additional point I wanted to make, and that was the pivot and shift, which I knew this was going to happen. And I had this conversation with my kids from a mental health or emotional wellness standpoint, being moved away from the school or school system, my wife needing to work from home all the time, there was a component that you was giving up, and it's really like grief. And so being able to be there to help coach them along that process, since part of one of my lives, I was a mental health clinician, being able to help them through that and be able to physically see certain things that were different, really allowed us to truly be able to help them navigate in different situations like that in the future when we're not around, and how to adjust to that. I just thought that was important to note, particularly with this new normal, because a lot of things are not going to change. And so we had to be mindful and situationally aware of how our family as well as our employees are adjusting to these changes.
Oh, Kelly, thank you for adding that. Think about, again, when we're talking about kind of a new generation of fatherhood, what you're doing there, Kelly, is you're really sharing the emotional work of a family. And that is huge and powerful, both for your wife, but also, again, the role modeling for your kids around how men can support children with emotional work, and how powerful that is for our children to see and then learn from. Wow, thank you. So much more to say. And luckily we have another round of conversation to hit on these points, but you've raised some really great ones. Thank you. Ed, when you think about how has things shifted from you because of insights from the pandemic or remote work, and what's your fatherhood journey been like?
Thanks, Jessica, and just honored to be on the panel here with Kelly and Julian as well. And I'm blessed to be someone who's watched Julian's kids grow up a little bit too, because we were colleagues together, Great Place to Work, and I know his two kids, Castle and Kingsley, on their trip. So no wonder he wants to spend time with them. I'll just start a little bit from the 30,000 foot level. Kelly and Julian had such great personal stories there, and to your point about how has remote work changed fathers, it's really allowed many men to experience the satisfaction and the joy of care, and to really bond more with kids and partners. And you heard that from Kelly and Julian. I would just point to some research that I think, Jessica, you and I might have talked about from New America's Better Lab, that suggests that the experience of providing care changes men and makes them more likely to identify as caregivers, more willing to push against that old ideal worker status around the kind of work hard all day, kind of sacrifice everything to be at the job to earn more money, and to substitute some of that with caregiving. And this research also found that by putting men more in these caregiving roles, the pandemic has really helped them see a new part of their identity and change how they see themselves, and they want to keep doing it, being caregivers. So, and this has been true for me as well personally. Speaking of soccer stuff that Julian raised, my daughter has been a soccer player for a long time, and so she did have soccer practices during the pandemic, thankfully, and I was probably her main driver to get to practices. And we also had a ritual of making smoothies for each other during the pandemic. And so, she's a strong-willed kid that Julian knows a lot about. We've talked about her in some presentations together, but it's been a bonding time for us, along with my son, who's now he's taking a gap year right now. He's 19, my daughter's 17. So I would say it has increased my identity as a caregiver. And just to add one other piece of the puzzle, in the book that I co-authored with Ed Adams about reinventing masculinity, we saw that many men are hungry to embrace caregiving, and which is to say, really, I lean into this idea of compassion and connection as part of who we are. And that's breaking some of the conventional confined views of men, where you have to be stoic, unemotional, and self-reliant. And that's really a formula for becoming a distant dad rather than a devoted, affectionate father. And that's really been changing, I think, during the pandemic and all the remote work that's been possible.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us that big picture look on these issues. Again, that's what we want to explore today, is how can we have more of that, where we are not so restricted in our assumptions around what fatherhood looks like, and more expansive in our thinking. That's wonderful. And, part of it is also about just creating time. And we're going to get to the, the issue about careers and leadership and masculinity in a second, but like how does family end up being different because dads create time? We were starting to get at that, Kelly, with some of the points you made, but like, we at Third Path could see dads creating more time in all kinds of different ways. As simple as maybe they work a 4-day work week and they have a daddy day, or maybe even, supporting their partner to have the big job and they become the parent at home, the full-time caring parent. Or like what Jeff and I did for years when our kids became school age. We just divided up who was in charge after school. And somebody was home on Monday, Tuesday, and Jeff was home on Monday and Tuesday. I was home on Thursday, Friday, and we did different things on Wednesday. And, so we really just kind of tag teamed how to get work done in a way where we also really could be around for our kids. So Julian, starting with you, what does it mean for dads to create actual time for family? And what are some of the challenges around dads creating time? And, what do you see as a goal for yourself if you want to around some of those ideas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm envious sometimes of the folks who, I watch a lot of YouTube, and a lot of the YouTubers who are successful, they talk about the flexibility that they have in being able to produce content. I mean, it's a hard job, but they talk about being able to be there for their kids when they want to and things like that. So, I don't know that people are just sticking things on their calendar like mine. My calendar is wide open to my organization. And so if people see time that I haven't blocked off, then they can take that time or use that time for us to meet. So I've had to intentionally just sort of block time and create time for me to be able to do things. We did something very similar, Jessica. So during the school year, Mondays and Wednesdays are my days to take the kids, or the opposite days I pick up, or if it's not on the calendar, I'm always afraid that I'm going to leave one of the kids at wherever they're supposed to be, because it just doesn't even exist sometimes for me, which is its own dilemma. But I would say, I one of the things that I'm blessed with is I have a group of dads that I hang out with. We're called the Bad Dads Club. We're hoping to get some leathers and some patches pretty soon here, but we're actually like good dads, we say, so it's a little tongue in cheek. But one of my really good friends, his sons are the same age as mine, within a couple of months, and to see the difference in how he has to engage with his family, which is a lot of outsourcing, can't be there for a lot of things, has to be really intense at certain times, like on Saturdays when he can get there, he does it all. No time to spread that throughout the week. I know that he has to be a lot more stoic. I think I heard the word. He has to kind of just roll with the punches on it. And I know that he looks at me like, oh, it must be nice, that kind of a thing. And so to be able to make the time for the family, I think it gives me the space for all of those things. But I know that a lot of guys are not in that. And I feel the pressure too, because even hearing him and folks like him that say, oh, it must be nice to be able to go pick your kids up, there's a little judgy in there, and a little like, oh, you're not working as hard, or you're not doing as much. And it's like, I have to kind of make that time up myself, man. There are nights that I stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning because things still have to get done. So I feel like it's still a little transactional, where I can take time from here, but it has to be replaced somewhere else. So, maybe it's me being more efficient, but it is, I do see that time is relative, and I'm very aware that some folks don't get that time, and therefore they have to condense all of their nurturing and caregiving into this moment. And I don't think that they're really satisfied just from the conversations. I don't think that that's actually a sustainable path.
Yeah. Well, what you're starting to get at, Julian, is this interplay between what's happening on our organizational expectations and what we're trying to do as parents, and how this, actually something else Alex Payne said at the very end of our webinar last month. He said, we need to thank women for pioneering the concept of a 4-day work week, because, women have been out there kind of pushing the envelope around thinking differently about how to get work done. And I think setting a precedent that hopefully a lot more dads are following. But there is this interplay between what's happening at the organizational level expectation and what we feel like we can do. We might get to it a little bit later, but organizations, there's always going to be more work to do. There's always going to be more work to do. And I think a really important skill set for organizations is getting smart at the team level, organizational level, and individual level of like, what's the right amount of work? Are we prioritizing the right amount of work? Are we doing it efficiently and prioritizing our most important work? We'll come back to that. But it is this interplay between what's happening at the organizational level and what we feel like we can do at the individual level. Kelly, how does making time for family make a difference? And why has that been a driver in your life?
So I'll lead with this. Maya Angelou once said, people will forget what you say, they'll forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so I can't make anybody feel any way if I'm not just present, because present just means you're in the room, but the engagement component, which is present, is critical. Time, like land, is the two most precious things that we never get back once it's gone. So for myself, I'll never forget 2003. I did many years in the military. I was going to a deployment. My daughter was just born. I got to see her face and I left. And the only thing I could think about was, what happens if I don't come back? Fortunately for me, I came back. And from that point forward, I always made sure, like, dance mom no longer existed. It was dance dad. I was always there with both my daughters. And to translate that over to in the workplace as a leader in a government organization outside, once I left the military, it was important that I impressed that upon those who I was leading in that office. So I wasn't leading with the tactical and strategic component. In that moment, I was leading with emotional intelligence and helping people to understand that although you had to get the job done, you're not going to be efficient and effective as you could if you're not taking care of yourself, because stress and all these other things play a factor in that. So being able to help people understand boundaries, having balance, and then leveraging the time that you have in the most efficient manner made my team some of the most effective teams to this day. And Ed was talking about the data, right? Normally we talk quantitative and qualitative, but even qualitative data will always be tied back to quantitative if you're doing it right. Because when people have time and they appreciate you as a leader, that time translates into them performing well if you give them the appropriate resources. So that's one of the things my children's friends love, and I call them my children too. Your dad always, it don't matter what he's doing, he makes sure he stops and he plays, he jokes, he has conversation, because I think that's the most important piece. The work, we got 24 hours in a day. 8 hours is gonna be sleep. Most of the time, it's more than 8 hours of work, right? Which only leaves a minimal amount of time for family. In 2018, I decided I needed to flip that, and I needed to spend more time with family and less time working and more time empowering people to be able to be not only efficient and effective, but be able to do what they do best. And so that meant spending more time with my employees, who then started doing very well and leveling up and doing more work. So for myself, I've noticed the more time, the more engagement that I spend with people, the more empowered they are and the better they perform.
So, you know what I'm hearing, Kelly, it's like there's this negative cycle at work where too much is being asked of us and it creates firefights. It creates a problem where we're having, like, oh my God, the next thing that has to get paid attention to. And there's this negative cycle of too much work where we can't pay attention to people and we're, always behind the 8 ball. Or what you're describing is the opposite, where we get smarter about what's the right amount of work, how can I support you to do a good job at work and have time for your life? And it becomes this positive, virtuous cycle where they do better work, you're happier. And by the way, I bet, if you were a team leader during the pandemic, you wouldn't have been facing the great resignation with your teams because you were connected to those people. You were providing that kind of connection that people are wishing for and why they're leaving organizations. Great job. A great example of how we can rejigger the system to think smarter both at work and at home. Ed, if you've been listening in, you might want to take the 30,000 foot perspective here, or you might want to talk about it personally. What's better for you?
I'll try to tackle both, Jessica. I really appreciated what Julian and Kelly talked about there. And I would say what I've noticed from talking to men and doing some of the research in this territory is that without time and energy, care becomes a chore. With it, care becomes more joy. And when we talked last month with Alex, it just became so clear that this 4-day work week was so important because it was actually reducing the amount of work. It wasn't just forcing folks to stay up to 2 a.m., which I know Julian has done, as doing some projects with him, but really kind of like getting more efficient. But a lot of the ways that it was happening is being more kind of honest and about what we need, like what are our needs holistically. So I think that spaciousness is so vital in terms of this caregiving and equality. And personally, it's really important to me too. Some folks, you and I think Julian at least know, I had a heart attack about a year ago, 2 days ago, a year ago, I had a heart attack, partly because I was putting too much on my plate, and I was not having the kind of resourcefulness to be a good parent. I was stressed out by both kids learning how to drive. It's in San Francisco at the same time. It was really hard. And I've kind of learned that lesson. Like, I got to slow down. And that has allowed me to be more playful and energetic when, helping my wife cook, or cook, her helping me cook. And it's more of that kind of fun thing to do together, as opposed to an obligation or drudgery. So, I would say that this notion of taking time, and for me, I've had the ability since the beginning of 2021 to create more of this space and time, because I've become a solopreneur. I left Great Place to Work to go out on my own. It's still a challenge to not take on too much. That's my challenge at the moment. But I am grateful for having that freedom. This summer, for example, I'm going to be doing like 4 or 5 work weeks of solo parenting, because my wife is going to work on an art project up in Oregon. And I'm looking forward to that time, to connect more directly with my daughter. So yes, time and energy is important, and really it's good for care. It's good for life beyond the caregiver as well.
Yeah. Which brings us to, I think that, it does lead really directly into this whole idea around how we have some assumptions around leadership that can get in the way of actively engaged parents and actively engaged dads. And so that's where we're going to go next. I'm also looking at the clock and wanting to make sure we have plenty of time for today's participants to, be part of this conversation, because this is a town hall style webinar. And so shortly, I'm going to get everybody who's here today a chance to join into the conversation. We actually run this webinar a little bit longer than usual, with the idea that we can then hear back from our breakout groups about the discussions that we're having today. So we're glad that you're here for today's town hall. And so I'm going to start the next topic, but this is actually going to be one of the breakout groups that we discuss in the town hall discussion. So we'll just begin the discussion and then open it up to those who want to participate in this discussion can stick around and join in as part of our town hall. I'll explain more of that in a second. Okay, so we feel like there's some traditional assumptions around masculinity and leadership that can impact men's involvement at home. So I gave you guys a chance to think about that ahead of time. If you had a brief thought you wanted to share around how does this assumptions around masculinity and leadership and our kind of the traditional assumptions around those things maybe get in the way of dads being actively involved at home. Julian, we're going to talk at length about this, but do you have a short thought about that you want to share? And then I'll ask Kelly the same thing.
Yes, definitely. There's so many things that I'm sure other folks have experienced it like me. But one of the things that's come up, especially even as we've been talking today, is I think that, so I'm dealing with my emotions, right? Like when I'm at work, I deal with my emotions. On my BART ride home, train ride home, car ride home, I generally deal with my emotions. So then when I get home, I could be present. That was the typical thing, right? So I would show up, kind of cooled off, kind of chilled out a little bit more so. And what I think, but so now, because my wife sees me all day in all types of different like phases of me, my emotions are, I'm more comfortable expressing my emotions. So that's something that's been a benefit for me, to be able to, like, being home and just kind of being in my space. And what's been interesting in terms of interesting thing that her and I have been going through is, I don't know that she knows Julian emotional. Like, I feel like she might see the walls kind of falling down when I start tripping out on things that I could work through in different ways, So that's one of the things, is like, how as a family am I able to like be productive in my emotions and still find my processes for kind of handling them, but also being okay sharing my emotions. And so that's I think the short, other than lots of other things we could talk about, that for me has been something that I've been noticing a lot more lately, is how I'm dealing with my emotions, and how having emotions in my family and not being the stoic dad who just comes in and, plays the part, hey kids, catch the ball type of thing, it actually is it's creating a different dynamic that I honestly, we're still in the middle of working out. My wife has always been very clear about her emotions and like how she feels. And I've kind of handled that. I think the family has gotten has gotten our share of that, but I don't think that we've gotten the share of dad's emotions. And that's what's coming out lately, positive and those that are not as productive sometimes.
Well, we are whole people, and emotions are a part of us, and learning how to kind of think about and integrate them into our lives in a way that works. I'm really interested with that word, the stoic dad, the stoic leader, right? Those are two norms that go hand in hand, the stoic dad, the stoic leader. And I certainly know that as a leader, I'm supposed to be stoic. I've had to find some ways to be real, actually, and it's not always, I've found ways to be my true self as a leader, not just stoic. And I've certainly been someone who's shown emotions at home. So wonderful. I love that example. Kelly, connection between kind of norms around masculinity, norms around leadership. What's a quick thought that comes to you?
So the quick thought for me is, I want to get in some good trouble because traditional doesn't exist for me. Being on this stage with both Julian and Ed talks comprehensive and being holistic and understanding that we are more than just procreators. We are more than just providers. We are more than just protectors. We were meant to be both divine feminine and divine masculine. They're in our toolbox. We go in our toolbox and use which one fits the requisite situation that we need to use. And so with that, we're allowed to use the best tool to help us get the job done. And I'll just leave it there since you said short.
That is awesome. I think that's where we all need to go, Kelly. Thank you for that profound, short, right on target perspective. Wonderful. Ed, something short and sweet you want to add to this conversation before we open it up to the wider community to talk about?
First of all, amen, Kelly. I love the divine feminine and masculine. I definitely agree with you there. Another way to phrase it, Jessica, that's come to my mind is, I heard a person put this so well. There's a tough guy show. We're supposed to be tough, and we're supposed to like act like we don't have emotions, but of course we do. And the tough guy show hurts us as dads, as leaders, and as individuals. It contributes to suicide on the job for a lot of, and in life, not just on the job, but I've been working in some fields where that's been an issue, especially like in the ski industry. So I think if we can get past some of these false assumptions about how we're supposed to be men, it can really help us throughout our lives.
All right, so those of you who are joining us for today's town hall, we are going to be doing town halls 3 times a year, where we encourage people to really participate and share their thoughts in the discussion. And today you have 2 ways you could join the discussion. You could either join it because you want to talk about how remote work has reshaped your work-family priorities this past year, and the pandemic has reshaped them, not just remote work. And if you're interested in that topic, you'll have a chance to join a breakout group that will be moderated for all of us to share our thoughts about how the pandemic has reshaped our priorities. On the other hand, if you're excited about the topic that we've just been discussing, you can stick with me, and those who stay will be talking some more about this idea about how parenthood might feel sometimes like it's in conflict with moving ahead in our actively involved parenthood might feel like it's in conflict with moving ahead in our careers or becoming a leader, and what we can do to change this. One of the big things that Third Path's really tried to do over the past 23 years is help people act and behave and live different lives, more integrated lives. So we like to focus on what's possible around change. So when we're having these conversations, they won't be recorded. We will then, after we've had the breakout group discussions, come back into the large group, share some takeaways, and then open the discussion up for more conversation around these important topics of really, really thinking bigger about what does it mean to be a dad today? How can we be a dad, actively involved dad, and have time for work in a way that really works for us, our families, our organizations? Okay, so we've had an amazing discussion. Thank you very much. It was always too brief, but really good to see all of these faces joining us today, talking about this important journey we're on together of really expanding what it means to be a dad and a man and a leader. I'm going to share a couple of takeaways from our group where we were really trying to talk about this intersection of the definition of masculinity and leadership, and how do we break those down and make some new assumptions around it. And I thought you said it really great when you talked about what we need from leaders today. Why we're having the great resignation is because we don't have enough leaders like this, is leaders who are bringing their whole selves to lives and able to connect with people who bring their whole selves to lives. That's making our organizations a better place. And so really this dichotomy of, being the stoic leader wasn't working, and we have a great resignation to prove it. And so really what we're describing is the future leader is going to be a very different leader, and that's going to be really good for our workplaces. One of the people who was a part of our group wrote a great book about being an ally at work for women, male allies. And I had talked to him on a different occasion, and he had mentioned another important thing leaders can do and we can do as men and women in our careers. He described it as leaving loudly. So in other words, when you're about to leave to go do that parenting thing that you need to do, he described it as leave loudly. Let them know you're going to go do X. Don't be shy anymore. Be proud of your whole person self and the many hats you wear. And that not only is sending a great signal to your team, but to younger men and women about what the norms can be in our workplaces. So I think we're inventing a new kind of leader, and we're going to start leaving loudly to start emphasizing that. Was there any other quick takeaways that our group talking about leadership and masculinity wanted to put on the table? And then I'm going to check in with Sergio and hear from his group and see if there was any takeaways from their group. Anybody from our group want to add one more comment? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought of another one as I'm looking at Eric. Remembering every family's different. And, the goal is to look at your family and not get stuck in our assumptions around what a father's supposed to look like, or a mother's supposed to look like, or a worker's supposed to look like, but to really get in touch with what your family wants and to follow that dream that's right for your family. Anybody else from our group that wanted to share a thought?
Yeah, I would just add just the point that we as men, I think we're kind of like race cars, right? I actually do it's called a pit stop wellness check-in. And what I usually encourage my clients and the men to kind of just, once you're on the track, all you want to do is win the race. That's it, but the pit stop is there for a reason. And in the pit stop, once you come into the pit stop, you get to breathe a little bit. You get to really kind of examine what's really going on, and then you get back out on the track. But sometimes we just don't balance the two very well. And a lot of times we just wait to the end, wait to retirement before we come into the pit stop, right? We really have to take a better approach to balancing the two. And sometimes that may mean for a serial entrepreneur where you don't take a week vacation, you take 3 months off, right? You don't work 6 days a week. You go down to the 4-day a week and you just cut your expenses and make it happen. You may even add a few more years to your life, but we don't do enough of those types of examining, I think, and we kind of fall into the trap of just doing what we see most everyone else doing.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And thank you so much for sharing your story before. Without going in any details, what I learned from listening to Michael was the importance of taking care of our own wellness throughout all of this, and how much we can take any point in time to really make a big shift in our lives and reclaim a more healthy approach to these things. You don't have to wait for the big challenge. You can do it right now. Michael, it's really fascinating to hear your story. Thank you for sharing it. All right, there might be one more comment from our group, and otherwise I'm going to pass it over to Sergio or someone from his group. Any last comments from our group?
I just love this idea of every family being different, because my kids are going to be out of school, not next week, but the following week. And then my wife and I had all, we saw on Instagram, this great place to bring kids and all these ideas. And we're like, yes, we're going to do this. And this family did that. And the truth is, and then once we talked about it, we're like, you know what? That's too much for us right now. We've got 3 kids. I have this 2.5-year-old maniac who's just sabotaging everything. And it's okay. We don't have to limit ourselves to this. We can do, as long as we get on the same page. And it's oh my goodness, let's go to where grandparents are. Let's get some help. Let's soften things and slow some things down right now. And and it's really just, again, it's what do we need? What works? Hey, if we do this, it's probably not going to work. This is what's going to work for us, and try to just shed the judgment, shed the shoulds or this or that. And it's just, what do you and your family need, and forget all the rest. Easier said than done. But that's why I always love the name, The Third Path. There's 4, 5, 6, 87 other paths. There's really just, it's unlimited what you need, how to do this. And there's no right or wrong.
Yeah. Nope. There's just what your family needs and how it's going to keep on shifting, because jobs change, kids change, all of that happens. Sergio, some takeaways from your group.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep it short. I want to encourage everyone to join our Trailblazers group on Facebook, because we're going to continue this discussion over there. I would like to say our group was small, but we went a little bit deeper into the conversation. And I would love to say something that we touch on the nostalgia that we feel when the pandemic allowed us to connect with our children, with our spouses. And now thinking about what's new, what's to come, whether it's, are we going back to the same thing, or is there other possibilities? We don't have to go back to how it was before the pandemic. Also, we touch on redefining the fatherhood role, that a lot of people saw, a redefinition of how they parent during the pandemic. And last, I wanted to include a quote that I always use in my community in Spanish, which is, being a father is a decision that you make every day. And every day you have the decision to be a better father than the last day. So I think, with those 3 thoughts, I would like to just say that was, our conversation in our group. So thank you everyone for being here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, I think that's what we really are imagining for our next season of webinars, is supporting people to keep on holding on to the lessons learned from the pandemic that were the ones that made their lives better, because there's a lot of forces at work that can push us away from those goals. And we want to be a resource to you to keep on holding on to, how did the pandemic make your life better, and how can we help you keep on holding on to those truths. We're going to put up some closing slides. We're going to hear a last thought from our wonderful panelists, starting with Kelly and then Ed and then Julian. But let me put up some closing slides just as we finish up for today's town hall. Okay. I just want to remind everybody that you will also find some great resources on our website. We have a lot of free things that you can download and use to help think about your work and family goals. So we, again, our goal as a nonprofit is to try to be as big and helpful as possible as you continue to reach for new definition of fatherhood, new ideas around leadership. We want to be a great resource for you. So Kelly, thank you for your profound thinking, how we have the divine masculinity and femininity in all of us. You always amaze me. Tell me one last thought as you think about these important topics we've been talking about today. Kelly, we want to hear from you.
Before I get my one thought, I just want to say happy Father's Day to every man that's in this space right now.
Yes.
You rock. And then my closing thought is, one of the words that you used was traditional fathers, right? I just want everybody to remember that when you think outside the box, you are focused on the fact that you're in the box. Be outside the box, be engaged, be present, and be the best you that you can be, and continue to evolve. And I'll leave it as simple as that.
It's a wonderful, wonderful approach. It's working well. Thank you. And so Ed, again, thank you for both sharing your personal thoughts and the 30,000-foot view. What's a closing thought about these important topics we've been discussing today?
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks to everybody here. I just want to say that this stuff takes courage. And I want to honor the brave men that I heard today working to reinvent masculinity and reinvent fatherhood. It's no small task, and I appreciate you all.
Yeah, well said. It is no small task, and but yet such a meaningful task. You know, we can see it. Those of us who have a little bit older children, it is hard when your kids are little to know how profound it is, what a difference you're making in the way you're doing fatherhood today. And I can see it with my 25-year-old son and 30-year-old daughter that who they're looking for to be partnered with in life is completely different because of the kind of role modeling Jeff did and what you guys are doing. So I second that happy Father's Day thought too. Julian, last but not least, we want to hear from you, a closing thought.
You know, I think I said this a little bit earlier, but you know, it's beautiful to see that we're not alone in this. And I think Kelly said this, Ed said this, I heard this in our breakout group, that it is kind of up to us to keep, you know, pushing forward for what we want and what we need and what we believe our families, communities, and the organizations we work with deserve. And so I'm realizing that it's not just my little group of 5 dads and then the people I know that read Ed's book and then the people, you know, it just feels like these concentric circles of people. And it's not, you know, just like the women have done for years, fought for these rights that we enjoy today and balance this, that it's up to us to keep our foot on the gas in that way and stay out of the box and be okay playing over there. And so I'm really just enthused and really happy, made my day to be here and feel all of y'all's good energy and also the courage that it's taken, as Ed said, for us to be here and show up in this way. So thank you for that.
Yay! Well, thank you, everybody. Really great webinar. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions for today's discussion. Happy Father's Day.